Hello, welcome to Learn Swift Programming for Beginners, Lesson 1. Today we're going to talk about variables. You're going to learn about what they are, how to declare them in Swift code, and furthermore, how to use them. Alright, so let's get started. For the rest of the lessons in this series, we're going to be working inside this app called Xcode. Xcode is the tool that Apple has provided for people to build apps with. And inside Xcode, you're going to be able to create your user interfaces. You're going to be able to write the code to express the logic in your app. You're going to be able to test your app even. So that's why this is where we're going to start in learning Swift. We're going to be writing the Swift code inside the app that you're actually going to use to build apps with in the future. So this is where you're going to get Xcode. Just go to your browser, go to developer.apple.com/Xcode, or you can launch the Mac App Store on your computer and search for Xcode there. If you're on the web page, you can see that there's this big blue download button up top. Now, ideally, you want to make sure you're using the latest version of Xcode, and right now, as of this recording, it's 8. And you can check your version. If you go to Xcode, you can see it here in the welcome screen, and you can also go up here to Xcode, about Xcode, and you can see what the version is. If you're a PC user and you're running Windows, there may be some additional work you need to do before you can run Xcode, or you might have to use an alternative solution to build iOS apps. So check in the description below for PC solutions. However, if you are a PC user, don't let that discourage you. For me personally, I lost about 2 to 3 years of learning iOS development simply because I didn't have a Mac and I didn't want to get a Mac. But these days there are alternative solutions. You don't actually have to buy a Mac computer, although I eventually did, and now I haven't looked back. So anyways, now that you have Xcode and after you've installed it, it's a pretty large install. It's a pretty big program. So it might take some time, but after you have it installed and you launch it, you're going to see this welcome screen. You can see here that when you want to create an app for iPhone, iPad, Mac, or whatever, you're going to go to create a new Xcode project, and that's going to start a full out project for you to build an app in. But here we're going to start a new playground because that's going to allow us to type some code quickly. It's going to let us run that code and see the results, and we're not committing to building in a project. It's simply like a sandbox or a playground as it's named. Now, if you don't see this welcome screen, what you can do is just go up to File, New, and hit Playground right there. And that's going to start a new playground for you as well. Or you can just hit this button, Get Started with the Playground. So that's going to launch this dialog for you. And I'm simply going to leave the default name there. Platform should be iOS. And I'm going to save this on my desktop. Okay, so after your playground runs, you'll see up here it's doing a whole bunch of stuff. Launching simulator, getting it ready. And when it's done all that, it's going to say ready. You can already start typing in code. So there you go, it says ready. But when it doesn't say ready and it's doing something, then chances are whatever you're typing here is not going to show up on the right hand side. Okay, we're going to start with a quick tour of this playground window here. So down on the left hand side, I have a bunch of line numbers. Now, if you don't have these and you want them, they can be useful at times, especially when I'm teaching and I need to refer to line numbers. You can go to Xcode Preferences and you can go to Text Editing and you can simply enable line numbers there. Now, this area right here is where we're going to type our Swift code. And it's already got a bunch of stuff for us right here, which we're going to go through in a second. On the right hand side, you're going to see a quick preview of the results of what you typed there. Now, a lot of people have trouble with getting output to show up on this right hand side based on what they type here. Well, one of the things that you can check is just in this status bar up here, make sure that it says ready. And as you're typing something, let's say I change something like that, you're going to see that for a brief second there was a little spinner because it's evaluating your code here. If you want it to show up, just make sure it says ready to process your next command, and you should see that output there. Alternatively, there is a tray down here which you may not notice because it's hidden at first. You can hit this button to show the debug area, or there's also this little button here to hide the different panels. Okay, but we don't need to see all of that. But this debug panel may be useful when we start to output things here. This is called the console area where we can use Swift commands to output things. this blue icon here is to execute the code in your playground. So if you can't get things to show up on the right here, try clicking this button to run your playground. Right now it's blue because you can see there's a little drop down arrow there. If you click and hold it, you can see whether you want to switch it to automatically run, and that's going to run the playground whenever you type something, or you can set it to manually run, and you can see now it's grayed out. So if I type in some new code, it's not actually going to change or display what I have on the right hand side here unless I click the play button to run it. So I would recommend to have it set to automatically run. So now that you know the main areas of the playground, let's get into the meat of today's topic, variables. And in fact, what we have here is a variable. In Swift, a variable holds some data. Now this data could be a value, it could be a reference to an object, or it can even point to a function, which are things that we'll get into the future. But for now, we're going to say that variables hold data. Now, as you can see from this example line of code, a variable has a couple of distinct parts. Let's break it down. Variables need to be declared before they can be used. So this var keyword is used to declare a new variable. Following the var keyword, you have the variable name. In this case, it's str. And really, that's it. You've declared your new variable. So it's got the var keyword and it's got the variable name. Now taking a look at the whole line, what we have on the right hand side there, that's some data. We did say that variables hold data, right? And that equal sign in between the variable name and the piece of data, well, that's an assignment operator. So what we're doing in this line of code is we're declaring a variable called str, and then we're assigning that piece of data to that variable. So now jumping back into the playground, let's see the effect of that. I can say something like print, which is a keyword that is going to print something to that console area down below. So if I say print and then in the parentheses I put str, you can see that it's printed that hello playa sref line down there. On the right hand side, we can see a quick preview of that, and notice that there's a /n here, and that is basically just denoting that there's a new line associated with that print statement, because the next time I print something, it's going to be printed on the next line. So you don't see that here because a new line is just a carriage return or a white space. You can't really see it. But in here in this preview, it's visualized as that /n, which is just a new line. So let's take a look at a couple of different pieces of data that we can store into variables. So I'm going to declare another variable here called a, and I'm going to assign a number into it. So just var1, and I'm going to declare another one called b, which I'm going to also assign 1. And I want to show you that you can perform operations between the variables or on the variables. So for example, I can say print a plus b. And you can see here that the result in the console here is 2. Now notice that when I'm using the variables in an equation or an operation like this, I don't need to use the keyword var because that's only for declaring variables, right? So this little part is declaring the variable, but when you use them afterwards, you just need to refer to them by name. So let's try some other things. Print a minus b, right? Print a times b. Okay, so variables hold data and you can perform operations on variables. Now you can change the data that the variable is holding. So I can say something like a equals 2 now, right? In fact, actually, let's not do it down here. Let's do it here. After we've assigned 1 into a, let's say a equals 2. And as a result, you can see all of these operations have changed because a is now 2. So a plus b is 3. A minus b is 1, and so on, because a is now 2. Now when you assign something into a different piece of data, it replaces what it was holding on to before. So a is no longer 1. It is now 2. But notice how when we assign a new piece of data into a, we don't have to write var again. That would cause an error because we've already declared that variable up here, and memory in the system has been allocated to it, and so we don't need to redeclare it. All we need to do is assign new data into A, like that. Now if you're playing around in the playground yourself, you may notice something like, what if you try to assign something into str, like 1? Well, you're going to get an error, and that's because of something called data types, which we're going to learn about in the next lesson. But for now, just know that for str, because we've assigned some text into it up there, if we want to reassign some data into it, again, it has to be text as well. So that would be valid. Furthermore, you can also assign a variable as another variable. So I can say a equals b down here. And in that case, a would now equal 1 again. Well, it was 1 to begin with. So let's say I did that. So if a was 2, and then I said a equals b, then now they would both be 1. Now before we move on, a quick note on naming variables. Here we have a variable str, and I've named some variables a and b. So normally you wouldn't name variables like a and b because they're not descriptive of the data that they hold. So if you're going to be using variables just like this in an operation, wouldn't it be easier if you knew what a represented and what b represented? Well, you can declare your variables using any sorts of names that you would want, but you can't put some special characters and you can't put spaces in your variable name. However, the common practice is to use a form of camel case where the first letter is lowercase. So let me show you what I mean. So I can say var, and if I want to describe my variable, if it represents, let's say, the number of apples that I have, I would say something like my number of apples, like that. And you can see that each new letter of each word is capitalized except the first one. Now you don't want to get too crazy with the length of the variable name as well, and you don't want to go too short, so short that it doesn't actually mean anything. So there's no right or wrong answer or hard limits. It's based on, your own preference, and it's more important if you're working in a team with other people that you agree on a certain coding style, because you're both going to be working on the same code. Okay, so one more thing I want to talk about are constants. So they are like variables, except that once you assign something to them, you can't reassign data into them. So that's really the only difference. That, and also how they're declared. So with variables, you use the keyword var, but with constants, you use the keyword let. So I can say let c equals 10. And then down here, if I try to reassign something into c like that, Xcode is not going to like that, and it's going to throw an error, and it's going to tell you with this red dot down here, and if you click it, it's going to say cannot assign value to c because it's a let constant. Now it gives you this little bubble here which you can click, and smartly it's going to change let to var because it senses that you want to reassign data into it. So you might ask, why would I ever want to use a constant if it's more limited in its functionality? Right? If I declare everything as variables, then I have all the flexibility I'd want. Well, there are a couple of reasons why you'd want to use constants when it makes sense. For one thing, it helps the computer work a little more efficiently because it knows exactly what that constant will be, and that's not going to change. But more importantly, it's that for you as a coder, you know that that constant isn't going to change. Because when you're building your app, you're going to have a lot of variables, and when you have some sort of issue in your app and you don't know why it's happening, and you're tracking down your code, you're tracing it line by line, and you're trying to see if maybe at some point you've accidentally assigned something to a variable and that's throwing off all your calculations or all of your logic, it's going to be a nightmare to try to solve and untangle. So if something it isn't going to change, you can assign it to a constant, and then when you're looking through your code, you can be sure that the issue doesn't lie with that constant because it can't change. Okay, so that's it for this lesson on variables. I hope you're practicing on your own computer with Xcode, and check below this video for a link to the cheat sheet and the notes. I'm going to have those ready for you as soon as I can, if they're not already down below the video. So thanks for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next lesson. Okay, bye for now.